Well, hey, friends, welcome back to Stay Forth Leadership Podcast. I'm Jonathan, your producer and co-host alongside Alan Briggs. And wherever you find yourself today on this Thursday afternoon, it is a pleasure to have you, whether you're riding in the car or sitting at home watching on YouTube. I just want to say thank you for tuning in. We produce these episodes weekly for you, and the conversations that we have are curated specifically to help you take your next right steps towards a healthier and more impactful life and leadership. Now, joining us on the podcast today is really and truly, she's a powerhouse, man. We've got Stephanie Chung on the podcast. Stephanie is an international best-selling author. She is a top-rated speaker. She is a top 500 CEO. She's listed on the Ebony Power 100 list, the former president of Jet Suite, and the founding growth officer of Wheels Up. Now, the conversation we're having today is Stephanie is going to sit down with Alan and discuss her new book. It's a bestseller. It's called Ally Leadership, How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You. And we're going to be talking all things success strategies and how to lead people who look, think, and act differently than you. They're just not like you are, and the challenges that come from that. How do we thrive? How do we take our next steps? And really and truly, how do we confront the leadership challenges of the modern era? I've enjoyed this conversation. I'm excited for you to watch and you to hear it too. So sit back, listen, and enjoy our conversation with Stephanie Chung.
We get it. You're busy. You want to grow, and we want to help. You're passionate about your craft because it deeply matters to you. Your faith is important. It's your foundation. At Stay Forth, we coach leaders to avoid burnout, live and lead with clarity, purpose, and from a place of health. We want you to experience long-term impact. Welcome to the journey. Stephanie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Alan. I think we're going to have a really good time.
Yeah, I mean, we already have. We're already in a great conversation, already kind of joking around, and then just realizing we have so much in common here. And first of all, before we get to your book and, sort of your core message right now, give us some of your experience. I mean, how did you get to this spot where you needed to write this message?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. And I always start every single interview at the same exact spot, which is have to give credit where credit is due. I had mentioned to you off camera, because I know that you live in Colorado. My dad, I grew up a military brat. So my dad was a master sergeant in the Air Force. So I am that kid, Alan, that grew up hearing planes take off and land my entire life because I was on active Air Force bases. So I fell in love with aviation really early on. So I've been in aviation for about 40 years, started off parking planes and loading luggage at the Boston Logan Airport, then moved up into sales, sold for the airlines for many, many years, then got recruited into private aviation, where I sold private aviation, private jets, for many years, oversaw teams that sold private jets, and then got recruited into becoming a president of a major private jet company. So that made me the first Black person in U.S. history to run and lead a major private aviation company. From there, I then moved over to a company that I helped take publicly, which is Wheels Up. Your listeners may know of that particular brand. So I was the chief growth officer for Wheels Up. And then now, I still have a foot in private aviation as I'm a board member for a company called XTI, which is a publicly held company. It's a new jet that's coming out in 2028. Other than that, though, I am now on the speaking circuit, speaking about leadership, sales, and female power, as well as writing the book, which I know you and I are going to talk about. So that's a brief, I'm a 40-year overnight success, Alan.
And here you go. There you go. And yeah, let's dive into the book, Ally Leadership, How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You. And it really strikes me that we need this book in this moment. This is filled with tension, filled with division in this moment, cultural disconnection. I mean, so many of the things. This is a message for this moment. But let's start here. What is an ally leader? Can you define that for us?
Absolutely. So thank you for saying that, by the way. So ALLY is an acronym. So I always tell people I could have called the book Allyship, but it's really not a DEI book, right? I called it Ally Leadership because ALLY stands for ask, listen, learn, you take action. And that's really the type of leader that is needed for today for all the reasons that you just mentioned, right? So, Alan, if you don't mind, let me kind of step back for a second. When you think of today's leadership challenge. It's really about talent and labor and workforce, right? There's other challenges too, but I think every industry, every leader is dealing with also workforce issues. And so when you think of today's modern workforce, there's a couple different things that are historical that would make sense that leaders are like, kind of run around with their hair on fire. One is the fact that we have 6 generations working. That's never happened in history. So the workforce is anywhere from ages 16 to 75. So, you and I know a boomer thinks very different than a Gen Z or a Zoomer, right? They have different wants, expectations, just everything's different. So intergenerationally is challenge, or I should say challenge, but situation number one. Situation number two, we have women as the majority of the world's population. So women in the workforce, we see things differently, we communicate differently. So that's situation number two, right? Situation number three, we have every ethnic group, growing, the non-ethnic group shrinking. So that's situation number three. Then you start adding into people who had different neurodiversities or different able-bodied folks or LGBTQ plus. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So when you think of today's modern workforce, we as leaders are trying to lead people who are not like each other, and they're not like the leader. And so how do you level up your leadership game to be able to get the best out of everyone when they're so incredibly different? And those differences, based on research, actually make the team better. But nobody really talks about how leading a team that's so different than each other, that can also be challenging. We all talk about we need diverse teams. Yay. I agree. Research, we shouldn't be having a conversation about whether that makes sense or not. Every research statistic says the team's better, it's more profitable, it's more innovative, et cetera, right? So that conversation's closed and done. But what we don't talk about is, as leaders, how do you lead people who are so different? It could be culturally different, cultural influences, how they communicate differently, how they think differently. And so as leaders, that means we have to really level up. We have to step up and be able to lead, because it takes a different type of leadership to lead when people have different opinions and thoughts and perspectives, right?
Absolutely. Where do we start?
Yeah. So we start with ask.
Let's go. Walk us through the framework.
Yeah. So ask, listen, learn. You take action. In the book, I give a lot of specific details on how to do this, because what I don't want to happen, Alan, and I think this has been happening too much, is I don't want people to feel overwhelmed and therefore they do nothing, right? Because they feel like, and let me, since I'm talking to you, let me be really, really, give a very specific example. I think that one of the reasons I wrote the book is there's a lot of books out there for white men that say, hey, here's how you lead women and people of color. And though that's a fair conversation, because at the end of the day, white men still control 87% of all leadership positions in corporate America. So yes, it's a conversation that needs to continue, but it's not the only conversation, right? I felt like we needed to go deeper and wider. So my book is not about beating up the white guys saying, do this better, do this better. You know what? Listen, do what you can do, right? Let's make sure we give you the tools so that you're not so nervous to make a mistake. Because what happens is, and then in the flip side, we have to all give each other some grace, because we're all going to make mistakes, right? We're all working with people who are not like us. And so instead of just focusing in on one group and, smacking them over the head all the time, it's like, no, let's actually think about it in a different way. As leaders, no matter who you are, what race, color, sexual orientation, none of that stuff matters. If you're leading today's workforce, you're going to lead people who are not like you. So instead of slaughtering people because they may have made a hiccup or mistake or said the wrong thing, let's give each other all some grace, and also know that you will make a mistake, but don't let that be your excuse for not trying, right? So I want every leader, I'm not focused on, yes, it's great. Let's have the conversation with the white men, but I'm not focused there. I'm focused on every leader. And let's all have the conversation about how do we ask, listen, learn, and take action. So asking is important, and asking not because you feel like you know it all. You don't, right? You're dealing with someone that's probably has no background like you. So you're asking with the intention of truly understanding, not to respond, right? And then listen, less than 2% of our population has ever been formally trained on listening. So it's not our superpower, right? But it needs to become the superpower. And that simply means asking a question you don't know the answer to, and asking a question without judgment. Period. Right? And then the learn part, if you really ask and listen, by default, you're going to learn, right? You're a leader. You're at the top of the game. This is how you got here because you learned stuff. And so when you learn, now it's important for you to use your power, your influence, your gifting, your talent, your calling to now take action. Nobody needs you to listen, learn, and do nothing with it. We need you to listen, learn, and now take action.
It strikes me that curiosity is at the heart of all of this. And if we can just lean into curiosity from the start, it's going to take us to good places versus,
Yes.
well, I'm sure I know a profile of a person. And recently, I've just been hearing lots of people trash on people in their 20s. So that has absolutely nothing to do with race and everything to do with, I don't understand. I have a kid in her 20s and I'm wrestling through, man, we process things differently. And I'm hearing a hiring challenge with people in their 20s, as well. So, kind of let's take that for just a second. Folks in their 40s and 50s going, man, I know we need younger on our team, that kind of thing. What are some of the challenges that we're naturally going to face in that kind of push and pull generational differences?
Absolutely. And I'm right there with you, right? Because I have a team of people that are younger than me. So 20s, 30s. I have a daughter that's 30. And it can stretch you sometimes, right? Because we do things so incredibly different. One of the things that have helped me is I've got to start looking at them. And I would encourage every leader to do this as well. We have to look at the value that they bring to the table. What we tend to do is focus on how they make us, just make us sometimes want to pull our hair out, right? And so let's kind of reshift that focus. What is it that they bring to the table? Well, the reason why we have younger people with us is usually they're more technically savvy, right? They just see things differently. They're not afraid of computers and AI and all the new stuff that's going on out there that makes us more efficient, right? Now, where we tend to get challenged with some of the other generations is how they see work, right? And, maybe they don't want to come to the office, or maybe, 8 to 5 doesn't really jive with their mojo or whatever. So they may want to work 2 p.m. to, 10 p.m., right? So there's all these little nuances where we're thinking, okay, how do I bridge this gap? And I always go back to the same thing, right? If I can just ask. So and ask and listen, because here's what I care about. I don't actually care when you work. I don't even care where you work, right? What I care is that the mission gets done. That's what I care about. And that's true for probably most leaders. I just want the job done, right? And I want it done with the level of excellence. And so, and that's the conversation you have with people who perhaps see things a little bit differently, or they're a different generation. How can I get this, and this done from you at a level of excellence where we don't have to go back and forth and back and forth? You tell me what you need from me in order for me to get what I need from you. That's the conversation. Again, ask, listen, learn. I don't want anybody to overcomplicate this. And I think that's where, for me, if your listeners get nothing out of this from me, keep this stuff simple. We got enough going on in the world and in our lives to make, things overcomplicated. Leadership doesn't need to be one. I think so often we've made it a complicated thing where people then start getting a little nervous with it. But my philosophy is same stuff you learned in kindergarten. This is really what we're doing now. Ask, listen, learn, right? Most kindergartners will ask you so many questions where you're like, geez, are you writing a book? Like, that's just so many questions. But we as leaders and as adults, we need to step more into that. Just ask out of sheer curiosity. I love that word that you said.
Beautiful. So if that's some of the challenge there and how we attack that, what are the opportunities? What are the opportunities in a diverse workforce or just a diverse team?
Yeah. Well, one of the things, I read some research recently that diverse teams tend to be 70% more innovative. And the reason why they're more innovative is there's the obvious because they see things differently. But one of the things that's an undercurrent that I don't think we talk about is a lot of times when they come from different cultures or different backgrounds, et cetera, they tend to not just see things differently, but they also tend to, because they're not considered to be from the norm, that type of thing, that they're also more outspoken, right? So they're going to see things and go, I don't know that this is going to work because from the way I see it, we could probably do it better this way, right? And that now, again, could be challenging to manage, right? Because if you're a leader that wants to sit back, kick your feet up and say that do things the way I say to do it, you're going to have a hard time with this, with this generation, right? All the different generations. But if you're a leader that's like, I just need to get the mission done, tell me how think we should get that done. This is going to be a time for you that you're going to love it because the statistics are clear. See, I want a team that's going to be 70% more innovative. That's going to give me a competitive advantage. And how I drive that innovation is not to put them in a box of how I see things, but to let them run till apprehended. Right. And so that's how you do it is you get them all together. And then I'll give you an example. For me, I come from private jets. Obviously, we were selling very big dollars to very big personalities, to people who have very big influence, right? And so if I'm looking at the team and I've got from the board, we need to do this or have an increase of that or whatever, they don't really care what the markets are doing, right? So I've got to sit in front of the team and say, okay, guys, here's the new challenge we have. We've got to do a X percentage increase. We know everything's going on crazy around the world, but doesn't matter. We still got to hit that. And that the mission still needs to get done. How do you suggest? I'd love to get your ideas and your thoughts of how you think we should get there. That's something super simple, right? And then let everybody talk and throw their opinions out there. And, as leaders, we may know that some of those opinions, Alan's, make no sense, but that's not the time to shut it down. All we're doing is throwing out ideas, putting on the whiteboard, and, every idea is a good idea. Once I have, all the ideas from the team, Alan, then I'm going to go back and say, okay, you know what? These are all really great, guys. We're not going to be able to do all, 30 of them, right? But we could probably knock out 5. What are the most impactful? And you all have a big debate and discussion about what 5 we should focus on. Then I shut up and said, let the fireworks begin, right? Then, now we've narrowed it down and now we have a focused plan that we're all in agreement on and how we're going to run forward to get the mission done. So that's a simple way of the ask, listen, learn philosophy is all I'm doing is facilitating. I'm not trying to sit there and tell everybody, here's how we're going to do it based on my experience. I'm just trying to guide the conversation based on my experience, right?
Yeah, that's a great example because the what is not up for grabs. The how we need to shape together.
Yes.
The mission is the mission we're going after, but our strategy and our process, we need people to enter into. And it strikes me that you could be too far on one side where the mission's up for grabs, or so controlling, people don't get to speak into it. I love that. Man, so many directions we could take this. I was curious, you write toward bias in the book and how we understand our bias, and then you talk about rewiring your brain. Tell us about that.
So bias is not a bad thing. One of the things I like to do is challenge everybody's thought process because there are certain words that we've used that have become bad, but they're actually positive. Privilege is another one. Privilege is a positive word, and somehow it's now become super negative. And the truth of the matter is everybody has privilege, right? Like it's not for a certain group. We've all got privilege. And so when I think of bias, it's the same thing. Biases are actually good for us because it protects us in some ways, right? So the brain is, it's got certain biases. It is what it is. One of the things I find with leaders is once we understand, and in the book, I actually spent at the beginning a decent amount of time talking about neuroscience and brain research so that we realize that there's more to it than just how we've been brought up, right? There is some stuff that goes back to how we were created. And so therefore, how we rewire the brain is we're no longer running and afraid of tigers chasing us through, wherever, right? But what our brain has now done is found another new thing to fear. And that could be rejection.
Cancel culture or whatever.
Exactly, right? So it's adapting to its environment. And so when you understand that, it takes a burden off of you because now you're like, okay, it's just adapting. And so the way I can't change how the brain was created, I can change how it's adapting, right? So how I change that is where the rewiring comes in by making the unfamiliar familiar. So if I've never hung out with a particular group of people or, I have a bias that, women are loud and out or, 20-year-olds are lazy, like all that stuff. If I have that bias, then the only way I'm going to overcome it, thus making myself a better, more marketable, more productive, impactful leader, is to actually wire my brain by feeding it new information. And the only way I feed it new information, Alan, again, keeping it simple, is I've got to get myself in an environment where I'm asking, listening, and learning because I'm trying to rewire it. So if it may think of a particular person or group or whatever a certain way, I'm not going to rewire it just going, okay. I'm going to rewire it by changing the information I'm feeding it. And the only way I can do that is to actually immerse myself into that environment that gives me information to rewire it. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, without curiosity, without asking questions, how do you do that? How do you get new information? And I don't think reading a book at a distance is enough. And so, I mean, it strikes me that polarization and everything we're being fed online by, every little thing that we research, we're getting different news, we're getting different things. And so I think if we don't make that effort to do that, it's just not going to naturally happen, based on social media, based on so many of the things that we're sort of seeing the shadow of people. I think so listeners, this is a great invitation right now. And I think just we're big on asking questions here. I mean, I'm technically a professional question asker as a coach, and a podcast host. But I just want to encourage you right here in the middle of this episode, maybe even to pause it and go, who do I need to ask curious questions about who I do not understand? And maybe they're on your current team, maybe they're part of your family, because we've got these questions in the back of our mind. And somehow, Stephanie, I think we think that it's offensive to ask people curious questions. It's actually the opposite. If we ask it well with dignity, we don't get shut down asking curious questions, right? Like that's actually a sign of love.
Oh, you said that so perfectly, Alan. Say it louder for the people in the back. That was so well said, my friend. You're 100% right because every single person, and I've interviewed a lot of people, especially as I was writing the book and whatnot, people who here's the undercurrent. This is a head and heart issue, right? And so as leaders, it's head and heart. And so if you think of it that way, most people, exactly what you said, Alan, most people can tell if you're asking a question because you're truly curious versus if you're asking a question because you're trying to position them so you could prove your point, right? So head issue is the latter. Heart issue is, oh, if I can see you're curious, I'm actually okay if you ask the wrong question, or maybe you ask it in a way that's a little little offensive, because we know that you are trying to be curious, not hurtful. Right. And so that's why I would encourage, and I love your call to action, right? Absolutely. For leaders, this is my heart's plea. Be okay with asking questions. If your head and heart are aligned, whoever you're asking it to, they're going to be able to sense it. Right. And so then at that point, they're actually open to answering the question or what have you, because they know that you're coming from a good place. And that makes you a more curious, better leader. But don't be afraid. And that's what's been happening is people are afraid to ask the wrong question. Therefore, they ask no question and therefore they continue to assume. Right. And when you're continuing to assume, you're not going to listen and learn and grow. The other thing that you said that I really want to touch upon is you're right. As much you and I have written books, but reading a book, reading a paper, watching social media, that's get in there, right? Roll up your sleeves and get in there. Go into a neighborhood that you're not familiar, where maybe your language isn't the first language. Usually you'll find community centers, art centers, go eat some different food, right? Hang out in different tribes so that you can actually start to have a different experience, which then rewires your brain, which makes the unfamiliar familiar. That's how you do it. But you're not going to do it sitting at your desk, right? Because you're going to have to get in the game, So,
Yeah. Oh man, so many good invitations here for us. I want to get to the three profiles. Talk about three profiles of ally leadership. Can you share those with us?
a lot of times what would happen is people would come up to me, Alan, they'd say, I love this. I'm an ally. This is awesome. And let's use women for an example. So they may say, I'm married to the same woman for, 50 years. I'm a girl dad. This is awesome stuff. I have a big ally for women. Excellent. We're talking my language, right, Alan? But then I will always say, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. We definitely love to hear that. Tell me what you've done recently to show your allyship. Right? Tell me what you did this week. One or two things to show your allyship towards women. And what was happening, Alan, is there would be crickets. They don't have any receipts to back up the statement. And so you can't self-anoint yourself as an ally. the only way you can call yourself an ally, and the truth is you shouldn't call yourself an ally. Other people can call you an ally, but you really can't call yourself an ally. That's like me saying I'm a nice person.
Humility.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm a nice person. It's like, well, based on what, right? I can't say I'm a nice person. Alan can say, I met Stephanie and she's a really nice person, right? That's how ally works as well. So the acronym EARN, you have to earn the right to be called an ally, is actually 4 profiles. And so one is you have to establish the environment that people feel like they're seen and valued and they can be safe voicing their opinions. So E, you got to earn it or you have to establish the environment. A is you have to assure alignment. And this one's really important. The left hand has to know what the right hand's doing, especially when we think of leadership. So one of the things that I would always do, especially if I'm taking over a company, is I force walk a miles in the company, even on my board as well. And a walk a mile simply means that you're going to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. So I'll use aviation for an example. If my pilots are coming in to do recurrent training, that's what they have to do to fly the aircraft. But while they're in town, I'm going to have them come in and listen to calls that our customer service people may do, or go spend some time with finance so you truly understand how we make money in this business, right? So if you do that with every single person in your company, you're going to assure alignment. It's important that everybody in the company understands the business of the company. I guarantee you, leaders, here's my homework for you. Go ask your people, what business are we in? I guarantee you, you're going to hear some standard answer that's on the website. But if you ask them, well, how do we make money? Like, what are the several ways we make money? Most of them won't be able to answer that basic question. So you want to assure alignment, right? That's what the A is for. R, rally the troops. If you have now an environment where people feel like they can speak their truth and for the betterment of the business, right? Always keeping people's dignity and respect intact, and they understand the business, rallying the troops is awesome because you now have a team that is unstoppable. They will hit your goal every time, all the time, because they know what business we're in and why are we here and how does what I do serve what we do as a company. And then the last part is in. And I come from aviation. So you got to navigate the narrows. Where are we going? By when? How are we going to get there? What's the plan? What's the route? What's the plan B? Right? A pilot doesn't get in a plane not having a clue where they're going. Right? So you have to navigate all of that as well as leaders. That's how you earn. So those are the 4 profiles. That's how you earn the right to be considered to be an ally leader.
Beautiful. So much here. Again, listeners, you're watching this, listening to it, pause it and write down. There's probably an area you're strong in. There's probably an area here you're weak in. And that's okay. That's why we have these conversations here with experts to go, we're not all killing it in all these areas. In fact, it may feel like you're getting killed by it. That's okay. Move toward this. That's the invitation. Stephanie, we're using navigation or aviation today. So coming in for a landing on this, why does this book, but especially this concept, deeply matter in the midst of the polarization and fear we're living in right now?
Oh, thank you for the question. It's funny. When I wrote the book, 18 months ago, I didn't know we'd be in the middle of all this, right? So
That's a publishing cycle.
yeah, exactly, right? So why this book is important is I do believe it with my full heart, and I do believe this is part of my calling, right? Is that leadership, no matter what type of leader you are, no matter what part of the world you are in, we're all in a place that we've got the ability to have amazing influence. I do believe there's an epidemic as far as leadership is concerned throughout the world. And this is the time for really good leaders to rise up to the occasion, right? Now, with that said, the reason why this book is important is it's not I want to stress that it's not a DEI book. I think we're all having DEI fatigue. So it's not a DEI book, right? And not because DEI is bad, but because of how it's being presented out there. So this book is all about for leaders who want to remain relevant, who want to be impactful, who really believe that it's more than the stocks and the options and the titles and the money, that they really do believe and understand the power and the responsibility that leadership really is because you have the ability to impact people's lives. So this book is how do you become a better leader based on the times that we're in? And the times that we're in are going to require you, the leader, to constantly adjust because you're leading people who are not like you. That's not a bad thing. That is the most powerful thing that could happen for you and your business based on the research and the statistics. They can Google McKinsey, they can do Google Deloitte, they can do Google Harvard Business Review. Don't take my word for it. Diverse teams, and I use diversity not in race and gender, but in color, race, gender, communication style, thinking concepts, perspectives, cultural influence. Like, to me, diverse is just, we're just different. How do you use that power for good? Well, it's easy. Just get a bunch of people who don't think the same. But you as a leader have to know how to manage all of that. But when you do, and you can easily manage it by not overcomplicating it. When you do that, which is what the book is designed for, then you're not only going to have an easier job being a leader, right? Because it takes the pressure off you. You're going to have a more productive team. And you then now have the ability to have more significance while you're here on this earth.
Beautiful. I love that you end there. It comes back to this idea of significance, of impact. You don't listen to this podcast if you don't want to have an impact. We want to see leaders who are healthy and high impact. And the reality is, when you get healthy, when you have a proper understanding of this, when you are approaching your team well, it's going to cascade down to everybody else. So leader, you have some next steps from this. Stephanie, thanks so much for coming on. Friends, I would highly encourage you to pick up her book, Ally Leadership, How to Lead People Who Aren't Like You. Thanks so much, Stephanie. It was such a rich conversation.